AI. And so in effect, last June, I should say June in 2016, our CEO, Satya Nadella, put out a set of principles to say, what does it mean to be human-centered? And essentially, this is to start a conversation with other companies, governments, stakeholders everywhere to, really to create the awareness that for all of us who are creating this technology, we do have this responsibility to create human-centered AI. And, and I believe that that's a really, really important conversation and a dialogue to be had. Hopefully the OECD can facilitate such a conversation because you're such an excellent convener. Now to your question about job losses. So AI is a new set of tools. And however, it is very much about automating tasks. It is not about automating jobs, at least not at this particular point in time. So it does put on the table the question on how do we address skills development? How do we continue to enable people to develop the creative skills and the soft skills that can be used to complement AI? And I believe that's where the conversation really needs to be focused on, is that skills.
So that's taking us to kind of the role of government, and that's really what the OECD is about, better policies for better lives. It's about getting those both public and private policies up in place to ensure that happens. What role do you see for government here as AI really becomes increasingly mainstream? We've already got it on our kitchen tables in some cases. Carolyn, why don't you start? What do you think government can do to help, but also put some the public at ease, so we avoid a backlash, which could occur with a new technology?
Yes, no, that's a great question and a very important question, Andy, and I'm glad that the OECD, as an evidence-based organization, is really taking this up. I think that the role of government, first of all, is to enable continued innovation, AI innovation, and broad deployment across sectors, because it's almost a duty to enable this, so that we can enable the growth and the social, cultural benefits that, I think we've both been talking about. And for that to happen, there really needs to be, number one, a focus on human-centric AI. That really needs to be in the conversation. There's a general agreement on that in the past 2 days, and it would be great to really have that conversation more broadly and have that be adopted more broadly. And the OECD has done such a great work with respect to the privacy principles. So if there can be some guiding principles in place just to enable that human-centric AI with all the other stakeholders at the table to say, well, what are the issues that should be highlighted, should be mitigated? And furthermore, also remember that AI can absolutely be a part of the solution as well. So researchers are working on how to detect bias, how to enable transparent algorithms, etc.
Thanks. Well,
so as I have mentioned, AI is extremely powerful, and it can be used for good, I would say, definitely. And let's say for government as well, for is used for OECD, for example, for the mission that is for those governments, AI can really benefit for those missions and can have a very important impact. And also what is very important is that to be aware that AI can really benefit to everybody, and that also the vision how the use of AI is important and how it can benefit to everybody and to all the sectors of the industry, from agriculture as well for emerging countries, as well for developed countries, and even for a better stability around the world. Because from AI you can have lots of information, and it is good to have this information for better stability also.
So maybe a quick last question to you both, because you represent a little bit two ends of the continuum in terms of size, a very small startup and a well-established firm. Because I'm interested that as government begins to enter this space and begin to play a role, both raising awareness and of the opportunities and potential, but also saying, listen, there's some ethical guidelines, human-centric type approach that we want companies to adhere to, how can they do that in a way that still allows innovation to occur from the perspective of a very small startup?
Yeah, what is great, I would say two things are very important about the ethics, as well the data acquisitions, what you do with this data, and of course the analytics. The analytics is between is about AI, basically. So what we have been contacted, in fact, even by large international organizations or governments, it's about how to use those data efficiently, basically, to set up efficient policy for citizens also.
Carolyn, from a larger firm, I mean, Microsoft has more of the resources to be at the table and be part of the dialogue as governments go forward. But as you said, you're really trying to give these tools to a wide number of people, and it's there that maybe some of the most interesting, unexpected innovations might come from. How do we get the balance right in terms of government putting down some principles or rules, or in some cases, governments even thinking about putting specific regulations forward? Because there are cases where people worry about things going wrong. And so there's issues of liability and so forth.
No, absolutely. However, I think that, so one of the things that we've been looking at also is how to share best practices, right? And so because as AI is implemented in healthcare, in agriculture, in transportation, in manufacturing, first of all, if you have a set of guiding principles in terms of the development, creation, design, deployment of these systems, with those particular guidelines in place, there will arise best practices. So let's take a look at how these issues are being dealt with on a practical level, in many ways market-driven, and then see where the issues remain. Now, from a point of view of regulation, I think that to say that AI is not regulated today is not quite true, because at the end of the day, AI is another technology. And so there are sectoral regulations already in terms of, that regulates the harm of a particular technology, whether that be in healthcare or transportation. So those regulations would still be applicable. So don't, forget that they're already out there. On the case, with respect to best practices, as you know, that's why we formed a partnership on AI. And the notion there is how can we best work together, and that's companies, civil society, organizations, to try to address these issues, within in a very, very practical manner, if you will.
So I think you both have mentioned that kind of the leap we've seen within the last 5 or 7 years in AI has been thanks a little bit to having massive amounts of data at our fingertips, and then some innovations in terms of machine learning, using that data in an iterative way to teach the code what it's looking at. But these massive data sources have people a little bit worried as well. And so I'd love to hear from you, what would be a good government role here? We were hearing a little bit during the conference of so-called curated databases, that are databases that have been set up for testing AI. Is that something government should be getting into? Is it something that companies should be donating? I'd just be interested to hear from the perspective of a startup and a large firm. Long?
Yeah, absolutely. I believe that it's very good. In fact, we also speak about open data and all those data, from the different governments that they give. I think it's very good to create also new applications for the goods of citizens of each country. So this is quite, I think, important to share also those data, but also that there is some ethics or also best practice for the use of those data. So we are really firm believers that those data that are given as well by government, but also from, I was thinking about Copernicus also, that enable to create some new services which are going to be very useful for, everybody and for the good of everybody.
Yeah. So, I think that, this is a very difficult question, and it's hard to really answer it broadly,
Yeah.
because the context of how the same data is being used will be very